Okay, this is going to be a little bit different from my normal content. Usually I do, really scripted, in-character things. Not today. Today we're going to be doing a little tier ranking for Pathfinder 1st Edition classes. And instead of, doing it A to D or F and stuff like that, no, it's expanding brain format. Why? Because I wanted it to reflect the mentalities of people who play these sort of classes, because I've been DMing for the better part of 6 or so years, and I've seen my fair share of classes and who plays what, or at least what they tend to play in my experience. So starting off with the small brain classes, we have, of course, the Anti-Paladin. You see, the Anti-Paladin is basically, I want to make drama in the group class because it requires you to be at least evil. It doesn't matter what archetype, you're going to be playing an evil character, you're not going to be contributing to supporting the group. You're basically, I'm out there for me, and nobody else is going to have a good time unless everybody is playing evil classes. So just play Paladin, and you're going to see that as a theme with this little section, because the next two are also alternate classes. The Samurai and the Ninja, 90% of the time when you're playing Pathfinder, you're going to be using the main setting or a custom setting that, guess what, is going to be like mid to late Renaissance. You might see some firearms and stuff like that, but you're not going to see ninjas and samurai. If you find somebody playing this, they're either going to roleplay it okay, they might forget that they're, a foreigner or something like that, but 90% of the time, they're just not going to be playing very well because they forget that, they're a ninja or a samurai. Other times they're just, memeing. I mean, with these two, it's basically, why don't you just play this class? It would be just more fitting. But anyways, the next one, which really has the only non-variant class that actually has a real place here, is the Medium from the Occult Adventures. Now, the Medium is a funny class because it is basically, I couldn't decide on what I wanted to play, so I'm going to play this one class that lets me kind of do stuff that other classes do way better than this. Honestly, I don't see many people play Medium for this reason, because just about any other class can do stuff better than it. Even if you want to play a jack of all trades, a bard will suit a little bit better. Although we'll get to the bard, because we're in the next one, we're in the brain activity region. Now we have, starting off, we've got the Cavalier. It's basically I kind of want to play a fighter, but I don't want to get bogged down by a bunch of feats. However, some people can play it smart because they realize that, hey, this actually makes teamwork feats viable. Oh my goodness, there are so many possibilities. Let's hope they remember it. But otherwise, it's not that great, but it's not bad. Then there's the Barbarian. I mean, it's the Barbarian. You're going to just be hitting things and taking damage. And they're going to be doing a lot more if they take the Invincible Barbarian, because, my goodness, you could solo a low-level group of enemies with that. Like, it's ridiculous. I ran Hell's Rebels, and one of my players had an Invincible Barbarian. He just soloed an entire group that was meant for a full party. Just ridiculous. It is so easy a class. Like, you see, it's not about how effective the class is, it's just, how easy it is, and what kind of player is drawn to it. Next up is the Ranger. It's basically the Diet Druid with a little bit of fighter mixed in. So basically it's going to get a lot of novice players who don't really know where they want to be with that. It's an alright class. It's got a lot of staying power. It's fairly good early on, but it's not going to last in late game. Next is the Paladin, and oh boy, the Paladin. Where do you even start with that? Aside from being lawful stupid 90% of the time, I don't see too many Paladins that really play smart. The best way of figuring out if they're smart or not is whether or not they're going to cross-class into Oracle, because then they'll be super supportive. There's also the ranged options. They might be a bit smarter because they have to know their feat chains, but otherwise you're just going to get a lot of smiting. That's really it. Now there are a few types of monk players. The first type is the newbie. I don't know that the monk isn't actually a very good class because it's multi-ability score dependent. Basically, they don't know that they're actually in for a hard time. They see 3 good saves, they're like, oh, this looks like a good class, I can attack multiple times per turn. That's not going to do you very much of anything if your strength score isn't high enough. And if your strength score is high enough, you probably don't have enough dex or wisdom to have good armor class. So really, the only way to play regular monk is to roll for stats, and hope you have good ones. Otherwise, you're basically playing this for a very specific build you have in mind. Otherwise, it's not going to do you very good. The Bard, the alleged jack of all trades, master of none. Well, it kinda can do that, and some players do that. They're also good faces, so you get the whole horny bard stereotype that's been played to death. But really, the smart bards are the ones who pick it when there's a massive party so that they can use bardic performance to buff everyone. Because, just having one person in a party of 4 do nothing but perform for the entire turn is going to hurt more than just one person out of 5 or 6 people, because then it doesn't matter as much, because you've got a whole bunch of people being able to cover for them. Otherwise, the Bard isn't that great. There are a whole bunch of classes that can do that, but better, and we'll get to them. Now, the Fighter is actually a solid class if you know what you're doing. The thing is, what tends to happen is that a whole bunch of people just think, oh, I can use great swords and get a whole bunch of feats and attacking bonuses for it, and they're only going to use that one weapon forever. Or what's more, they use that freaking Titan Mauler archetype or whatever it is that lets them use an oversized sword so that they can have an even bigger sword when really they could just, use all this weapon training stuff to give themselves a well-rounded arsenal and actually be a contributing member to the team who does more than just stab things. But no. And last for this section is the Sorcerer, which is basically the, I'm new to the game, I want to play a caster, but I don't know this thing about prepared spells, so I'm just going to play this class. And to be fair, Sorcerer is pretty dang fun to play, and there's a lot of roleplay potential. My goodness, is it not capitalized on enough? Okay, these are the bright brain classes, the ones that actually are going to require a bit of finesse to work with, or ones that are actually some smart choices. But it's mostly the former than the latter. First off, we've got the Swashbuckler. Now, 90% of players who pick Swashbuckler are basically looking at, hey, I can use dexterity weapons and not get penalized for it. But there's a little bit more. Of course, there's the Parry and Riposte deed. At least I think it was a deed. Yeah, it was a deed. That is really good. That basically means you can parry melee attacks, and that's super good. That's always good. But really, the truly smart players will go for Inspired Blade, either for cross-classing or for Fencing Grace, which is basically dex to damage at level 1. And that's always good. If it's allowed. Otherwise, they're probably gonna go for, like, Slashing Grace or something like that. Next is basically the counterpart to the Swashbuckler, which is the Gunslinger. Now, a lot of people will look at the Gunslinger and say, oh my goodness, guns in a fantasy setting. And they have ×4 crits, which very few weapons are comparable to that. However, guns take forever to reload. The truly smart players for Gunslinger don't actually play Gunslinger. They play Bolt Ace so that they can A, afford their ammo, and B, reload at a decent amount of time. Otherwise, they'll go broke trying to, craft alchemical cartridges and get the right feats and get everything squared away. It's possible, but it better be for a really long game. Now we have the Shifter, and it's an okay class. Basically, the people who play it, okay, it's kind of a furry class, not really, but still. They basically play Druid, and they're like, I want a wild shape even more. And it does that okay. If you really like bears, or oxes, or other ones that actually give you decent offense, those are okay. Otherwise, it's more of a utility class. Now, the Shaman's kind of one of those weird hybrid classes. It's got a little bit of the Witch, it's got a little bit of, I want to say, Oracle? Like, it's okay. It's not remarkable, but it's okay. The Vigilante. Basically, I want my disguise checks to be through the roof. That is basically this class. Otherwise, they basically have like a superhero build in mind. That's pretty much it. There is no other reason to play the Vigilante. You want to play a superhero in a Dungeons & Dragons type game. In essence, the Psychic is pretty much a souped up sorcerer. In so far as, hey, you need to have 2 decent stats now. That's pretty much it. I guess whoever plays it wants to crush people's heads with their brains, but I mean, you can do that with some other classes too. The Hunter's an easy one. It's for people who want to play Ranger, but actually have some spell casting to them. Except that they don't want to play Druid. Now here are the smart classes, the ones that either need a little bit of know-how to do, or ones that are just genuinely good picks. The first is, of course, the Oracle. Now, I mentioned before with Paladins that taking the Life Oracle connection, or whatever it was called, basically lets you become the ultimate support class. What it allows you to do is hook up to 1 or more party members and take damage for them, and then use the Paladin's healing on yourself so that you don't waste a whole turn just to heal someone. People who do that know what they're doing. Otherwise, Oracle's just a really good version of the Sorcerer, but divine, so you can actually use armor, which is also pretty dang good. Skald's an easy one. It's your combat bard, so anybody who plays it wanted to play bard, but then they realized, oh my gosh, my melee options are terrible. So they played this, and they're pretty much going to be the most metal person at the table because they are basically playing Eddie Riggs. Doubly so if their character's also a tiefling. Hey you, do you want good utility? Do you want to survive in the wild? Do you want to turn into any animal you want to? Yeah, that's the Druid. And my goodness, why doesn't anybody at my table ever pick this class? I mean, it's pretty dang good, but I guess some people just can't get it out of their head that, you can play a Druid without being a gigantic tree hugger. I mean, come on guys. Get a little bit creative with it, please. The Blood Rager. Anybody who plays this basically wanted to play Barbarian, but then realized, oh my gosh, this can also cast spells. And they're just going to go crazy, man. That's it. They're going, take the raw, I don't care, I'm hitting it mentality of the Barbarian and just add explosive spells to it. Their spell list and class features are really conducive to buffing yourself up and then hitting things really dang hard. Alright, we are officially in big brain classes. These are classes that are just very smart picks, or ones that really do require you to have a good amount of system knowledge to properly use them. Let's start off with a cleric. The average person will think, oh, this is the healer class. No, that's not the cleric. Like I said, Life Oracle, that's the healing class. This is your Swiss Army knife of a class, and anybody who knows this is going to play it really, really well. At least in the crunch side of things. In the role-playing side of things, it depends. It largely depends on their deity. You could have literally anybody playing it, because that's just a whole new can of worms when talking about Pathfinder deities. You could be anything from a bard, or a drunk guy, or I am the law, to your average smite everything evil, to just plain creepy. The possibilities with cleric are near endless, because my goodness, they added so many gods to Pathfinder, it's not even funny. You think this has a lot of classes? The deity list goes on for several pages. It's ridiculous. The Alchemist. The class so good it made it into 2nd edition, but we're not talking about 2nd edition, thankfully. The 1st edition Alchemist is pretty dang solid. They can do quite a bit of stuff. There's buffing, there's sneak attacks if you want to take the Vivisectionist, and of course there's the bombing, the bomb class feature, which is really freaking good if you want to play a damager. So, people who play Alchemists are either really good strategists, or they really, really want to do a whole bunch of damage in one round, and they pick the right class to do it. There's also a poisoner build for it, but I really don't recommend poisoning builds whatsoever, because stuff just gets immune to it really fast. Next is the rogue, and why wouldn't you pick a rogue? I mean, they are the skill monkey class. Nobody else gets so many skill ranks per level. That said, expect them to do a lot of crazy stuff over the course of the campaign, because if there's a class that is more conducive to doing a whole bunch of shenanigans with skills, with sneaking, with, oh wait, I got that sneak attack, he doesn't know I'm there. Yeah, it's that kind of class. However, there is another thing. If they take Unchained, they are going for McStabby Stab, and it's probably a lower brain class than this. However, if they're going with the regular one, watch out, because they're probably going for ranged, or they know exactly what feats they want. Brawler is the class that people who wanted to play Monk wind up taking. The only barrier to entry is martial flexibility, which basically requires you to know 1 to 3 bonus feats that you can qualify for, but don't have. So if you really want to get the most out of Brawler, you have to know feats. And Pathfinder has a lot of combat feats. You know how I said there were a lot of gods? Well, there are even more combat feats. Good luck with that. Spiritualist. Well, first you have the inherent difficulty of controlling 2 characters at once at all times, which can really bog down your session unless you know exactly what you're doing before you even do it. That said, chances are they're going to be memeing it up with JoJo references and stuff. If they're doing that, they're probably taking Fractured Mind or something, and that's kind of just the meme version of it. That said, there is an inherent draw of playing a caster class that also has a ghost that can go around and punch stuff for you, which is really appealing. However, there are a few other spirit types that are a bit more utilitarian, and if somebody picks that, they either are not certain what they're doing, or they know exactly what they're doing and they're statting their caster to be the melee person. It really depends. That said, no matter what, it takes a decent amount of, smarts and game mastery to properly use the Spiritualist to its full potential. The Wizard, the class that everybody swears by, and in all honesty, yeah, it's a good class. It's got the massive spell lists. The only downside is that, it's got the whole prepared spell thing, so it's not super versatile. Well, I mean, it is versatile, but it's just not as flexible on the fly like the Sorcerer is. Yet, it's almost unparalleled for item creation if your DM allows it. The only thing that's really lacking about the class is, proficiencies, hit dice, just being squishy in general. And the class features, if you ask me, are kind of sparse. So, really, you're just there for the spell list. If they're playing anything but Conjurer, they don't care about the meta. If they are playing Conjurer, they're like, oh yeah, I read Trent Monk's guide. Conjuration's the best school, and I'm like, Illusion's pretty effective if you know how to use it. And if they pick Necromancy, they're just being an edgelord. Come on, you know this. You probably know this. Anything else, they're just, playing the class. Or whatever sounded good to them. Alright, these are the peak human intelligence classes. Starting off with the Arcanist, you want the on-the-spot flexibility of the Sorcerer, but you also want to have a wide spell list so you're not restricted. Well, guess what? The Arcanist is the one, and it's pretty dang flexible. There's a few moving parts to it that gives it a decent amount of depth. You have to really dig in to see what kind of class features you want. There are also a few good archetypes that are pretty neat. Don't know if I'd recommend them though. Like the Blade Bond one, it's pretty cool, but you probably won't have the attack bonus to really do anything with it. Still, pretty neat stuff. Pretty handy class, a lot of cool toys that you can use with it. Of course, the next one's a really good choice. The War Priest. There are two kinds of people who play War Priest. There are the ones who usually play Battle Cleric and realized, oh hey, I cannot suck with my mace now. And there is the other type who are, I can now stab people with this dagger, and it's effective. And that is probably the most fun thing about the class. I mean, you can just have a holy weapon that does decent damage now, aside from great swords. But if you're playing a great sword priest, chances are you're playing paladin. Come on. Next is the Mesmerist. Now, these are the people who wanted to play bard and thought that you could charm everyone. Well, that's not a class that can do it. This is, and boy are they going to use it, because there is no other class suited for that specific thing than this one. And they will have fun with it, as infuriating as it may be for the DM. The Witch is a surprisingly handy caster. Unlike the Sorcerer or Wizard, Witches aren't ones that attract blasters or... Well, okay, they attract necromancers from time to time because of that one build, but they're really good for inflicting status effects and all that good stuff because of their class features. So somebody who's playing a witch if they have cackle and like misfortune or something like that, they are going to be doing that. A good witch doesn't need to cast any spell throughout the entire encounter. So when a witch does cast a spell, chances are they're going to end something. Or they're healing somebody after battle. But chances are they've probably taken Cauldron and they've brewed up a few potions that can do that for them. Like, witch is just very good for being a support caster or a debuffer. These are the Ascended classes. They're the ones that have basically eclipsed regular base classes. The first of which is the Slayer. It is the best parts of Ranger, Fighter, and Rogue bundled into one, and the player who picks that probably knows it. And they're going to be either very, very good at killing things, or they are going to be a just absolute nightmare at when they go about killing NPCs. Because not only do they have the power to take them out in a couple of hits, if not one, they also have the ability to hide and bluff because of actually having a decent amount of skills. Be careful with these guys. And the same can be said for the Investigator, except they're a bit more dex focused. The Investigator is the best of the Rogue, a little bit of the Swashbuckler maybe, and the Alchemist, which are already very good classes. You've got... Except, the craziest thing about the Investigator is you don't need to actually sneak attack to do bonus damage. You just have to wait one turn. So what you can do is just buff yourself up with some extracts and just go to town on them. And that's basically how it's played. Like, I've seen massive amounts of burst damage from Investigator players. They can really, really mess up your plans if you don't, take them into account. So, DMs out there, be wary of Investigators because they are super versatile, and chances are anybody who picks them knows it. Now, the Magus hasn't gotten this far to have gotten past those two highly versatile classes for nothing. It's not that the people who play it are super intelligent or anything, it's just that this class is a no-brainer because, it basically tells you, hey, you want to hit stuff and cast spells at the same time? Gee, man, why wouldn't I want to do that and cause a whole bunch of burst damage? I've seen people solo bosses with this thing. Just by dishing out so much damage, it dies in 2 hits. That is the power of the Magus. The only thing is, they will be super stingy with their spells unless they absolutely know that they have to cast. That is it. That is really the only thing about the Magus. If you want them to use any bit of utility, they're not going to do it. They're saving their offensive spells. Now there's a reason I put the Occultist at this multi-arm Ascended rank, because good lord, you basically need a second character sheet for all the class features you're getting with this thing. Like, you need to micromanage a lot of stuff, so anybody who picks Occultist has done their homework, and boy, have they done it. They're going to have at least 2 more extra sheets just because of how much room the Occultist class features take up. Oh, not only that. If they take Penelope Savant, run. That's it. They're done. You're done. You don't need any other martial people. That's it. They're basically an absolute monster. You think the Blood Rager's crazy? Penelope Savants are ridiculous. There's a reason they're banned in Pathfinder Society. They're too good. They are too good. Anybody who plays an Elementalist knows that you're no longer playing Pathfinder, because at this point, you need an entirely new custom-made character sheet just to keep track of your burn, of all of your kinetic and wild talents, it's an absurdly complex class for something that's supposed to just do ranged damage and, a little bit of utility. That said, anybody who knows how to use the Elementalist to its fullest can be pretty dang scary, because not only do they, know how to write this efficiently, but also how all the elemental blasts go. Chances are they know which element to specialize in order to get the best defense. Chances are if they confidently pick Elementalist and they're like, oh, I'm going to try this out, it's like Avatar: The Last Airbender. No, if they pick Elementalist without flinching, they are going to trounce enemies, even early on. As somebody who has played Summoner and has seen what other high-level classes can do, the regular Summoner is absurd. It is absolutely absurd. How they got away with that kind of spell list is ridiculous. You get a whole bunch of high-end spells that are like 7th, 8th, 9th level spells for other classes way earlier because, they're only partial casters. They only go up from 1 to 6. But they get it so fast that you can create demi-planes far earlier than you should be able to. And it's ridiculous. But that's not even getting into their biggest feature, which is the Eidolon, which the Eidolon is probably the most handy thing out there because it's an entirely customizable, summonable being. It can be a meat shield, it can be a mount, it can be a scout, it can be anything, and it's fully customizable. You basically get a second character, and if you're rolling stats, you could have 2 melee characters if you so please. I know I did, even with the Unchained Summoner. Depending on what you pick, Unchained can also be game-breaking, because what I did was, I made a mount, but it was one form that doesn't usually do mounts. But it got weapon proficiency, so I got a big honking sword for it. Got it the mount stuff, got it some flying stuff. By the end of the session, I had a flying cavalier that could dive bomb enemies from 30 feet up, just deal incredible amounts of damage, and wreck face on anything that didn't have flying. They couldn't hit me. I think the only thing that could even get at me at the time were a bunch of vampires, and they didn't last long either. Summoner's ridiculous. No wonder they tried to nerf it. But it didn't work! It's still too good. And that should do it. If you managed to get through all of that, I congratulate you. Also, if you want to see more content that's related to Pathfinder and a proper design dungeon episode going over the Iconics, discussing their backstories and evaluating their character design, I would be glad to do that if this video gets enough views and likes, so by all means leave a like, leave a comment if you have any suggestions. In the meantime, I've got another design dungeon coming out probably later in the week,